Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy. I am really excited this week to be talking about a topic that I don't think we know very much about in the play therapy circles. And so the way this came about is we were having a play therapy academy. Excuse me. Of course, now I got a tickle in my throat. We were having, excuse me. Of course, when I hit the go live button, then I'm like, well, I get this like tickle in my throat. We had a play therapy academy consultation meeting. And one of the things that we do, somebody will staff a case and then we'll give feedback. And I think, Kelsey, you were giving feedback to somebody and you were talking about pathological demand avoidance. And we were all like, huh? What's that? And then you kind of explained it to us and applied it in the circumstance that we were discussing in the as we were staffing this particular client. And it made such sense. And I thought, you know what, we don't talk about this very much. And I think it's a really important topic. I think play therapists, child and adolescent therapists, to be honest, I think anybody who works in psychotherapy with people who are neurodivergent, this is probably a good thing to know about because it's something that we'll encounter. And I think it mostly gets misunderstood as oppositional defiant disorder, which I don't like that disorder at all. It is a real thing. I have occasionally used it, regrettably, because I think when we use that ODD diagnosis, then we put children in this kind of bad category, like, oh, they're just being defiant. Well, maybe there's another reason. And maybe it would be better if we looked at the other reason. So that's why I was really excited to have my guest this week, Kelsey Atkinson. Before I go to introductions, though, I just want to invite people, if you're watching on the live stream or even watching on the replay, please feel free to share your comments. We would love to know who's here, what population you work with. Are you using play therapy? Are you working with a population of children who are neurodiverse? Post that in the comments, post questions. The only thing that we ask is not to post specific client questions because it is a public format. We want to make sure to maintain client privacy. For those of you watching on the replay, honestly, please feel free to join the conversation. I love hearing from people, getting back with people. And for those of you listening to the podcast, feel free to join the conversation. If you find this information useful, then please feel free to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, share the information on your social media platforms. I feel like this is one of those topics that would be really good to kind of get the information out there and share it with your play therapy colleagues. So with that being said, I am very excited to have Kelsey on today's live stream episode. So Kelsey is currently in a private practice. Her population that she works a lot with is a neurodiverse population. So Kelsey, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your background and kind of how you got into working with this population?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my background explains why I'm drawn to working with neurodivergent individuals. My very first job was working in a group home for people with developmental disabilities. And that's where I started 18 years old. And then I worked for a lot of different nonprofits and worked with a lot of um, kids in summer programs and things like that, and did a lot of training for foster parents. And I just had this continual like bumping up against like trauma and mental health, and kind of wanting to be more in that aspect of supporting kids and teens, and especially I wanted to support their support systems, if that made sense. And so then I went the MSW route, and I was recently licensed in July, which was exciting.
Woohoo!
And
Very exciting.
I'm almost done with my application for registered play therapist.
Woo!
It's been a journey, but that, I mean, it's opened up so many different things to what I'm passionate about that I didn't know was that passion until I have that. And so I live in St. George, Utah, and I like the sunshine. It's getting to be sunny again, and that's what I need in my life. So that's a little bit. That's really the nutshell of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 80 degrees here where I live. So I imagine it was probably like high 70s where you are. It was such a pretty day.
I was just absorbing all the sunshine. It's what we need in our souls.
I agree. And I feel like the winters, the mild winters that we have here in the desert make up for the mind melting heat of
I'll take
triple
it.
digits
Yeah.
in the summer, right? I heard somebody say for the desert, the summertime is like northern Utah or northern Nevada, their winters where they get all that snow and everybody stays indoors mostly. Well, we stay indoors a lot in the summer because it's too stinking hot.
Yep.
Yeah, but I'll take it to have these. It's nice. It's really nice. Beautiful where you live too. If you have never been to that area, it is absolutely beautiful there. So, yeah, so today I thought maybe if you could talk a little bit about what is pathological demand avoidance, or the more friendly, less pejorative. That's my fancy word I learned
I like that.
in when I was getting my master's degree, was pejorative, and I thought it's such a good word. I have to use it whenever I can. So, or persistent drive for autonomy, which is the nicer, kind of less mean way of saying it, right?
It's nicer, and I feel like it captures more of the essence of what it is, as opposed
Mm.
to, because there's demand avoidance, which we all experience levels of demand avoidance, and even more typically presenting like autistic individuals have some level of demand avoidance, and so kind of boiling down PDA as just more intense demand avoidance, I don't think really captures or encapsulates. That's another big word.
Yes, yeah, we're going to use our good
Encapsulates
words
what
today.
it is. To get my dictionary out. Uh,
Yeah. Well, so how will somebody know if it is persistent drive for autonomy? What are some signs that people would notice that? Because one of the things we talk about this a lot in Play Therapy Academy as well. And when people do their presentations, I have them go through their case presentation and do kind of walk through case conceptualization. So, case conceptualization is a fancy term for what's really underneath this behavior, what are the roots of it, and what are the patterns.
yeah.
So I feel like if we understand what persistent drive for autonomy is, then we can include that as a possibility when we're doing our case formulation, because we can't really figure out what to do until we know what is going on. The only nuance I would add to that is child-centered play therapy would say you don't necessarily need to do that because it's child-led. And I would agree with that, except I think even with child-centered play therapy, which is the modality I use for the little ones, it helps with knowing what's going on in the session and being able to track it.
Mhm.
So I still think case conceptualization, even for child-centered play therapy, is helpful. So what are some of the signs? some
Yeah,
things
and
people would
yeah,
notice.
I think it's important to recognize that it's still this in development of research, but there is a wide variety of resources. Just knowing now, right? Okay, this is a thing. It opens up to a lot of research. So a lot of times I use the PDA Society. It's a UK based um, website that provides a lot of information. Most recently, a PDA network or community has opened up in North America as well, like in 2020. And so that also has really good resources too. And I think that's probably like the best thing that I can put out there is like go to those places because they will give a lot of information. And sometimes that's when I just give that to a parent and they read it, they say that describes my child exactly. And it kind of gives them that sense of like direction. But so
So
from
sorry. So it was the I'm putting these in the comments so
okay,
people, so it's the PDA
PDA
Society
Society.
in the UK. And what was the other one?
They do have a like a PDA community North America.
Okay.
Yeah, PDA North America is what it's called.
All righty.
Um,
I'll put that in the comments so people can
yeah,
see
there's
that.
because I mean loads of resources and information. Um, but in general, so coming from that kind of checklist, I'll kind of run through them. But a person might resist and avoid ordinary demands of life. And that includes things that they might even want to do. And I think that's like a key factor is you'll start to see this resistance of like, I want to do this, but I feel like I can't, right? Or there seems to be some of that resistance. But could just be like brushing teeth, showering, just those transitions a lot of the time, going from one activity to another. One part that often will, sometimes these individuals are not, they kind of fly under the radar for an autism diagnosis, probably for this reason of using social strategies as part of the avoidance. And they're often, they might be labeled as sneaky or manipulative, but really being able to, it's important to understand that PDA is anxiety driven. It's very, very
Mm.
sensitive nervous systems. And so a lot of these times, the sneakiness or these social strategies are not, they make sense given that information as opposed to they just don't want to do it. Um, and they appear sociable on the surface, but sometimes might lack depth in understanding social interactions. Or I notice they interact really well with adults who are like kind and affirming and usually giving them a lot of nice like, nervous system cues because that's predictable. Usually adults in those situations are fairly predictable with kids. They ask the same question. So they're able to really just know what to expect, but they might have some more difficulties in their peer interactions. Experiences excessive mood swings and impulsivity. So a lot of times it's described, as this like Jekyll Hyde situation where, a child doesn't seem to be bothered at all, and then they seem to be bothered greatly, and
Mm.
and there seems to be no cause, or to parents it seems to be no cause. But a lot of the times, right, people are like, oh, they go from 0 to 60. But if you think about it, they might be always at 50, but
Mm.
they hit a threshold and then they hit 60. And so people
That's
don't
such a
see
good
it
point.
until,
Yeah.
because there's just this constant nervous system dysregulation. Obsessive behavior often focused on other people. And that could be like real or imagined. I have a lot of kids and teens who have a very colorful internal world, if that makes sense. And so sometimes, things like TV shows or things like that gets brought into their internal world.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting.
and then appears comfortable in role play and pretend, which is again kind of goes against regular autism screenings. But sometimes to like an extreme intent or extent, and it's not always present. But I've seen that a lot, and I think play therapy really can really address and help that communication factor because I have some kids who, when given the chance, they really lean into that like child-led, non-directive space and they give me so much communication it's just not even like, and I see this with older kids, where they just are able to really open up, um, and explain things to me, in that kind of role play situation. Whereas they can't tell me, but the puppets and the figures and the sand tray, those things can, they can really communicate that well, and they might lean into role play in the sense of they're an animal, they're another person. You come and they're not themselves. And so you really just have to, roll with what they bring to you.
And you can kind of see how that, as you were talking, I was thinking that makes so much sense because if that demand feels like a pressure that increases their anxiety
Mhm.
and that they know, I think there's like an intuitive part we sometimes know like that just isn't going to work and I don't want to be bad.
Mhm.
So that just doesn't work, but I know I can do it this way. And there's an aspect of that symbolism, right, in the play that communicates in a way that bypasses some of those areas in the brain that we can't, those more cognitive, verbal, problem solving, analytical parts of the brain that in the moment when we're feeling a little pressure can be a little hard to um, access.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, kind of anecdotally, some other things that like are always on my radar of thinking this might be a child's experience is, I like you said, I think you when you're kind of being in tune with a child and kind of seeing where they're going, you see and you feel the nervous system activation. Even if they feel like they're like, I am presenting as cool as a cucumber, like you just feel it in a kid. A lot of times it's, even if anybody asks them how they're doing, I'm fine. I'm good, even though you're like, no, like just 20 minutes earlier, you had a full meltdown coming from the cafeteria. They're okay, they're fine. They may, if people are having a lot of family conflicts,
Mhm.
especially between parent and child, due to like just marked demands and like nervous system struggles. Just kind of on a personal note, as far as like I have 3 kids and I have a child who, um, I feel like when I read these characteristics, it helps me be like, this is
Remember.
experience.
Yeah.
Um, but just even as a parent feeling that nervous system, like I am always having to feel like my nervous system needs to be regulated. So a parent might be more anxious as well because they feel like they're kind of constantly having to manage things. They may do really well in school, even though that does feel counterintuitive, right? Like because it is a demanding situation. You might have some school avoidance, but you also might have them really thrive at school because that it's structured. They know what to expect. They do really well, but then they come home and they have large kind of breakdowns or challenges because they've just used up all of their capacity at school. And then just like masking itself and camouflaging, that's an interesting term to look up, I think, if you're working with neurodivergent individuals. But like and there's back and forth with it. I don't see masking as an intentional, like, right, I put a mask on and I act a certain way and then I take it off and I'm okay now. But masking is a nervous system response. And I try to tell it to people it's a social survival skill. And it,
Mhm.
it can be, especially for these really sensitive nervous system kids, it's an early social survival learning skill, like
Mhm.
toddler level, that they learn to deal with. It's just a survival skill that they deal with the demands that being a being a baby has, and being a toddler, and just trying to do their traditional developmental skills while navigating these really sensitive nervous systems.
And I think, you've mentioned, excuse me, nervous systems a lot. And I think that's something that's really important to think about because I don't, so, I've shared this a lot. Play Therapy Academy, but also on these live streams. Both my kids are neurodiverse. If I go up through my dad's side of the family, like check, 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 check. Before I even knew what these things were, in my own family, growing up, check, check, check. But I think we don't realize how much energy it takes to manage that nervous system overwhelm all day long and to navigate really uncomfortable situations. So it would make sense then, if you think about it from a neurosystem standpoint, by the end of the day or by the end of school, they're already sensitive anyway, sensitive to sound, sensitive to how close somebody is. Going to the bathroom can be, for some kids, challenging, right? Or just hearing lunchroom or recess, going out on the playground. All of these, for neurodiverse kids, present daily challenges that neurotypical kids don't know what it's like. So unless you have that kind of a internal system, then you don't really realize how much demand is placed on
Yeah.
a
Well, and
daily basis.
especially too when it's like they enjoy it as well. It's not like they're
Right.
actively like, oh man, I don't like this. I don't like being with people and playing and having all of that. But and I think that's hard sometimes for people to understand, to be like, the child doesn't even understand of like how taxing it is for them.
Right.
And so the behaviors are that communication that they're spent. And so
Yeah.
either they don't know that they're spent, and so we can teach them ways to save save some energy throughout the day, or help their systems help them save some energy throughout the day, or capacity for the day, or just even just giving them like permission to rest and to have a space between demands.
Yeah. So, what are some tips that you would suggest for play therapists, tips for working with this population, tips for parents, tips for things you can do in the playground? In the
Yeah.
playroom. Just
Yeah.
a couple of tips.
Yeah, I mean, child-centered approaches are great because, one, it really helps us understand them and their communication styles. Um, but I like that idea of like op play and having an op play lens, just knowing like different accommodations. I try to have my playroom be very we do this anyway if you're setting up like a child-centered playroom, is that I want to limit demand, or why can't I think of the word? Limits. I wanna limit limits as much as possible. Um,
Mm,
but I think a big part of it is just like recognizing that very sensitive nervous systems are in tune with other people's nervous systems. And so if I, as a therapist, am able to recognize my own kind of internal reactions, I can make sure I'm regulating myself. I might notice when I might start to become overwhelmed, or um, like I've had kids who, when we talk about testing limits, it feels a very intentional, like testing limits to see how far, and even if I say, "Oh, it's fine, I can handle that." But if I'm like, "Oh," like my muscles tense up, or they sense that that's not okay and not safe, and so they may, pull away from certain topics, or not interact in certain ways, and it really just like, you know, the bars go up of like, "Nope, you don't get to interact with me." And just kind of knowing that like play is the communication. I feel like as play therapy, like we really understand that, but this may even last beyond like typical things that we did, like 10, 11, 12 years old may still want to engage in these kinds of interactive plays, because it's really important for them. I try to avoid asking like really direct questions. Again, child-centered, but
Mhm.
even as much as like, are you having, how was your day? How do you feel? Sometimes that's hard because you're like, oh, how are you doing? And they're like, right, like, don't ask me
Yeah,
questions. And then I got put in jail or something because I asked too many questions.
that's right. Or
Um,
handcuffs, right?
Yeah, but our I think just psychoeducation and support for parents is a big one. Again, those resources have like really good resources for parents, but some things that might be helpful as you're like researching, declarative language is a term that's helpful. It's kind of using statements, comments, and observations to
Mm.
be like, oh, I noticed, I think a person the other day was like, the parent was like, I noticed that, if you wake up or you seem to not have a lot of time in the morning. So, I wonder if like you set an alarm or something like that. Even then, that's you just are twisting it
Right.
a little bit to make it less direct. But and then
Mhm.
low demand parenting is another one that I use for with people, and it scares them because they think it means certain things. But essentially, low demand parenting is just trying to employ low arousal strategies to help keep anxiety at a minimum and be flexible and collaborative to increase a sense of autonomy and just reducing those perceptions of demands. It doesn't mean child gets to do whatever they want, but it just means we understand that they need a lower arousal approach.
And I
And
think that kind of using a lens of curiosity goes along with what you were talking about, the declarative statements as well. Like, I'm curious. I noticed you did this. When you use curiosity, you're, I think it does some of that low demand and also invites exploration. Like you're not just jumping to it's this. I mean, sometimes even curiosity feels like demand to um, children who have this.
they're very good at knowing when you're trying to trick them.
No, they are. They totally are. Yep. Yeah. As you were as I was reading through this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think one of my kids had this. This would explain so much. Um, and you just kind of learn intuitively as a parent to back off, and they're just going to go to their own little drummer.
Yeah.
Like, don't think they're going to go the path of the way they're going to get there in their own way. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just kind of support and follow as long, we monitor to make sure it's okay, it's safe, it's okay, it's not self-destructive or anything like that. But sometimes giving up that control, and what we thought was going to be the way as parents or even as play therapists.
Mhm.
Like we think it has to go this way. And to me, that's where child-centered play therapy is really beneficial because you learn to give up control. You
Mhm.
can't be in grown-up mode in there when you're in the playroom, which I always kind of thought of art play with as like child-centered play therapy with the neuroscience and the neurodiversity lens to it. Um,
Yeah, you almost, like, give up to, like, typical if you're looking at an opt play perspective, like, you're almost giving up to, like, the typical what is typical, right?
right,
And be like, "Oh, if this person wants to play with it in this way, they're still doing play therapy. It just
right,
may not be what we traditionally see
right.
in those, like, even, like, attachment or nurturing themes, right? Might look a little bit differently from an opt play perspective, but you're still seeing it as nurturing and attachment. Um,
Yeah, for
um
sure.
like, even if, like, a kiddo that like, cars were people. Houses were representations of his people, and so being able to notice that was a really, like, key factor in, like, "Oh my he's doing nurturing and attachment because these are his" he's
Mm,
representing his people.
that's a
Um,
really good point. Right? We wouldn't think of it that way traditionally, and we
yeah,
might,
so
because one of the things
open
I
our
hear
minds up to things.
yeah, oh, he's being really concrete. well, let's take a look at that and see what's actually going on. And then you're looking, well, I don't think so.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you also, so you've been a member of Play Therapy Academy for a while. And I think one of the things about Play Therapy Academy that I find most beneficial for people, which is one why I've had people from Play Therapy Academy kind of be guests on the show, because I think we have such a wealth of knowledge for people. Even like I'll have people say, "Oh, I don't really know anything." And everybody else, basically they're saying everybody else is going to know so much more than me and I'm not going to really know anything. And then they come in and we staff a case, somebody does a case presentation, and then they'll, use courage and speak up when they're feeling insecure about it. And then it's kind of like, oh my gosh, that's so profound, and I find that happens over and over and over. And I know, like, when you were talking about PDA in a recent group meeting consultation call, we were all just kind of like, wow, that's so awesome. And I know from my perspective, being able to help and support people to learn to use play therapy, to use a play therapy theoretical lens to get started with that and apply that, plus my almost 35 years in the field. But what I find is the group dynamic, right? So all of you guys and the insights, and you don't have to know everything, right? Because somebody else in the group is going to know something that's going to be beneficial. So I was curious for you, what in Play Therapy Academy has been useful for you?
Um, I appreciate, one, I appreciate just you
Aw,
in general. I feel like a lot of what you share and what you do aligns with how I feel about an approach to play therapy, and so that's a big part of like how I sought you out. But also just the structure that the Play Therapy Academy provides. I think sometimes we get lost at sea. At least me, we get lost at sea in the application process, and so that the structure really helps with that. But overall, I just have really enjoyed the opportunity to share within a community. I kind of I geek out a lot about play therapy, and then some people like they're like, that's nice. But when I'm in like a group with other people who are doing play therapy and really working with kids, and just I get emotional about it. Like hearing the case studies and hearing what people are doing to support kids and families, like it fills my cup to know that like there's other people who are passionate about that. And then yeah, just being able to ask questions and hear from a variety of perspectives is super important. Because right, I get into my little tunnel vision of like what I do, and I'm like, oh yes, like there's all of these other things, and other, just uh, I want to say different approaches, but not really, just like different ways of being, a person who does play therapy and a person who sits in a playroom with kids and supports them. And it's just kind of nice to see that of how possible it is for people to do that, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes
Where
total
a
sense.
lot of people, right, they're like, "Oh, I couldn't do that," or, I'm like, "You can."
Right. Yeah. And I find that too, because I feel like all I've been in the mental health field since 1992 when I graduated, so I've been in here for a while. I even get lost. So I feel like that group component of having a place, and I like the structure too. I feel like we have a limited time. We want to accomplish some
Mhm.
things. So let's maximize that. But as we go through that case conceptualization process, it kind of challenge you to get back to the basics and figure things out. Plus, I even sometimes like that's one of the things I like about it as well, because I'll be like, oh, it's this, and I'll be giving my feedback. And then I just kind of sit back because then other people will provide some insights and feedback, and I'll be like, oh, that's such a good point too. Yeah.
And I do
So,
want to say you're very accessible
oh,
as, being able to like send questions and you provide a lot of great recommendations and resources. And I really appreciate all the opportunities.
well, it's been great having you in the group, and we'll be very sad. That's the nice thing. Like, we're always so excited when people, because most people, pretty much everyone in Play Therapy Academy is going for that certification. I
Mhm.
mean, that credential. And then it's exciting when you get your RPT credential, registered play therapist. But then we're always sad when you go.
Yeah, it's like, oh man. Yeah,
Yeah,
it feels good to be close to done, but then I'm like, oh man, but always
yeah,
it's that opportunity, to consult and to, again, that it opens up the networking opportunities too, where like, oh, I know these people, they know me. I can reach out
exactly.
to them
Yeah,
for support if I need to.
for sure. So, um, Kelsey, how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you, or maybe they want to reach out and find out more information? How
Yeah.
can how can they get?
So I work for the agency I work for is Zest for Life Counseling. Um, I am licensed in the state of Utah, and so I provide telehealth. And I'm very flexible with telehealth and even working with kids and families. But in St. George, I'm in person. And then yeah, I have a psychology today. I don't have too many fancy things yet, but
Well, there you go. So, for those of you who are interested, in the description, there is a link. Um, there should be a link in the description where to check out Kelsey on Psychology Today. I think that's in there. And also, we'll put in the comments a link to her website, and also make sure there's a link to Psychology Today if anyone is interested in reaching out and finding out more. And then also, for those of you who are interested in Play Therapy Academy, we do have a few openings at this point. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, we meet twice a month, and like kind of like what we talked about here, it's really hands-on. Like, there's a schedule, people know when they're presenting their case, they go through their case conceptualization. We look at how are you applying your play therapy model, we give feedback. There's lots of, I would say one of the things I love about the group is very supportive. Like, everybody is so supportive. And when you think you've just made a mess of things, the group rallies around you, and we're like, oh, no, I don't think so. Like, you did all these really good things here, and look what a great job you're doing here. So we give feedback, resources. So and then in between the group meetings, there's a group chat feature, because I feel like people, having to wait in between meetings, I remember it was really hard. So having that space where you can get support, share your wins, ask questions, ask for resources. And then there's also courses in there that I feel like are some fundamental things that we need to know as play therapists that give us a really good grounding, and we can always build from a strong foundation there, like case conceptualization and what is play therapy and what sets it apart from other modalities, and writing treatment plans and progress notes and working with parents. So all those things are also included. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, then schedule a free 30-minute video call with me. We'll put a link in the comments about scheduling with me to see how Play Therapy Academy can help you. You can pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. And again, if you want to reach out to Kelsey, then we'll make sure we have those links for her. All righty. Well, it was awesome having you today, and I really appreciate you
Yeah,
coming
thank
on
you
and
so much.
sharing all your knowledge.
Well, thank you. It helped me be like, all right, let's structure this in my brain.
Right?
So
Yeah.
it's good to know I have a spiel. I have a spiel that I can give to people.
Oh, good. That's awesome. All righty. So we will see you guys next time.
Thanks.
Bye for now.